Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
As I encourage everybody to do each and every week as you open up the Torah to read a new parashah, a new section, you should ask yourself questions about why this doesn't make sense. I know that sounds heretical, blasphemy. How can you say it doesn't make sense? I'm not saying the Torah doesn't make sense. But what I'm saying is that when we first encounter it, you should be prepared to feel like some elements of it doesn't make sense, because that way you will investigate and hopefully then you will discover sense inside of it. But that sense will be unsensed if you are not inspired to dig a little deeper. So let me give you an example of something that you might have considered while reading this week's Torah portion, where it goes through not just the list of all of the special holidays that we have in the Torah, Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot, all of the amazing Hagim, but that we are also told that during these Hagim we have to go to Jerusalem. It doesn't say Jerusalem yet, it says the place where I will cause my name to dwell. There you will offer up these sacrifices, clearly indicating that this place is different than that place, that there is something special about the place where God's name will dwell that is somehow different than every other part of creation. And come to think of it, every other moment in creation is somehow different than the moment of Pesach, than the moment of Shavuot, than the moment of Sukkot. I mean, God is omnipresent, right? That is one of the basic assumptions of Judaism. God is present as something beyond time and space can be, in every place in the world simultaneously. It's not as though there's more God here than there is over here. God doesn't accumulate in certain places like a puddle. God is equally accessible in every spot of the world. Likewise, God is eternal. And that's eternal with a capital E, not just God doesn't wear out like some mega energizer bunny, but instead that God existed before time existed. And God will exist after time ceases to be a function of the universe. That form of eternal nature leads me to wonder, why would this moment somehow be more special than that moment? Again, it's not as though there's more God in this moment than that moment. It's not as though anything is more godly or less godly at any given time. So why should Passover be different than the day before Passover? Why should Shabbat, for that matter, be different than Tuesday? Why do we say that certain places are holy, certain times are holy? Can we all be a little bit skeptical for a moment, right? We can see that just at first glance, this seems a little bit unusual, not to say that we deny God, far from it. It is because we believe in God's complete greatness that the concept of somehow there being something special in a unique way that makes a moment or a place more holy than any other place would seem to be antithetical to the true understanding of God's greatness. For if God is truly great, God is always great. It's not like it gets better or worse. There is no ebb or flow to God. To understand this, well, there's a very simple experiment that we can do. When it is a clear night, go out and look up in the sky. And you will see stars. Why are there stars? Why are there? There is no reason for there to be stars. That is to say, if you were to rewind the universe and start with a very simple calculation based upon the energy that was present at the beginning of creation, at the Big Bang, that all other things being equal, which is doing a lot of heavy lifting and many scientific endeavors, there shouldn't be stars. There shouldn't. Gravity is equal, as far as we can tell, in every part of the universe. And there is no reason why any particular piece of energy would be more likely to come into contact with another piece and form what we call matter, which would then have mass, which would then accumulate through the process of gravity, that would allow something to accumulate so much that it would turn into a giant star, which is, of course, what all of those little sparkly dots in the sky are. They are representative of the fact that the universe is ever so slightly uneven. Not completely, because otherwise it all would have bunched up into one big ball and then there never would have been anything that we would have been able to experience, but just just enough irregularity, enough non-uniformity to allow matter to catch and to build and to eventually form stars, which would eventually form solar systems, which would eventually form life. Without those little irregularities, if the entire universe had truly been perfectly smooth, completely bump-free, with nothing in its gravitational computations to cause any one thing to pull more tightly than any other thing, we would not exist. It is because of that irregularity that life is possible. Well, so too within our own life. That is to say, if the calendar was completely free of irregularities, if our world was completely free of any differentiation between a place where we could feel a more sacred connection to God than any other, then so too we would simply wind our way through life in a gray fog, with each day being much the same as yesterday, with each place being much the same as the last place we went. And we would never have that experience of stepping into a synagogue and feeling different than we felt outside. We would never have that experience of sitting around a Seder table and thinking different thoughts, of feeling different spiritual connections, of being a different person than we did the day before the Passover Seder began. Because of these inflection points, because of the change that each one of these makes, we have an entire constellation of experiences that would otherwise be missed. Judaism has told us in the book of Kohelet, there is a time for everything under the sun. A time for living, a time for dying, a time for dancing, a time for wailing. That because there has been made these differentiated points, these different moments when we can be something else, that we can feel something else, life takes on a richness and a texture that we would be impoverished were it not to be there. Indeed, I'm not sure that we would be even spiritually awake. After all, if you look to the rest of the world's animal kingdom, well, apart from some biological impulses, every day is much like any other day, more or less. It is only within humanity that we have been able to realize that days can be different, that life can mean something different. And it is not a knock on God to say that a place can be more holy than another place, or a time can be more holy than another time. It is not saying that God is somehow diminished in the other places of lesser holiness, of lesser time. But we are ennobled, we are inspired, we are made greater when we step into those places and when we come together at those times. So when we examine the list of holidays that are there in all of their beauty in the Torah, when we examine them in our lives as we go through the calendar cycle, don't simply check it off the list, but recognize this is one of the small irregularities in our life that allows us to turn into something as beautiful as the heavens above, as the creation around us, and in many ways even more incredible, because the sun does not marvel at itself, and yet we have the capacity to marvel and to feel awe. With that, I will wish you especially a Shabbat Shalom.